365 Sports, great friend of the program, Jim Williams, Forbes, and many other publications, but Forbes is a darn good one, so we're going to mention that one first, but it's been on the show quite a bit. And Jim, the ACC, a conference with you are very familiar, has decided to expand in a way that makes less sense than any of the other expansions, but this is where we are right now. Your thoughts on how it went down, why NC State flipped back, and what the future holds for the three dissenting votes?
Paul, one of those back and go, okay, look, it's musical chairs. There's only a few of these Power 5 chairs open. Stanford, Cal wanted it. SMU clearly wanted it. And the only place to go was the ACC. And so, logically, it doesn't make any sense because, last time I checked the map, there's a lot of distance between Tobacco Road and Strawberry Canyon out at Cal. But at the end of the day, it was up to the conference, and the conference said, okay, let's do it. And they probably wanted it to, because if they lose, some schools, which some feel that they will, that, they have backloaded themselves ahead of time. So, whether it made sense or not, very little makes sense in what we're dealing with in these realignment situations. One thing I do know, and this is something you and I share, is a knowledge and a passion for FSU. And I'm really perplexed by why FSU and Clemson and some of the others were just, have said how many different ways they can get out of the conference, when it just doesn't seem to be as easy as they think.
No, it's not. And I think sometimes this is a uniquely American skill, I think, of like, as long as you are loud about something, people think you might have it figured out. But
right.
I think that's right now they're in the let's be loud phase, and then you guys better figure it out, because we're going to get hoarse here in a second.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen some, and I'm sure you guys have seen just as many crazy ideas. There was one floated around the other day that, and again, this is a rumor. It has zero validity to it, but it was just kind of what the thing was talking about, that they could buy their way out of the conference for $120 million. Then Fox would put up the $500 million to get them into the Big Ten. And then they would, even though they would have to play their games, the home games, on ESPN, that would still be okay, because Fox can make money on, on the games that would air on NBC, CBS, and where, all the other channels that Big Ten is on. And you're thinking, okay, let's get this straight. In 5 years, they would have expended $1 billion on FSU. On what planet does that make sense?
No, look, I'm the biggest fan there is, and I wouldn't spend $1 billion on them for anything. It is. But for the three schools that are coming, I mean, they're not just foregoing media rights for 3 years.
Oh my God!
For 9 years. How do you sustain without that money?
I don't know. And here's the irony of all this, right? The irony of all of this is, had they, had all of the Pac-10 that, went in different directions, taken the first bid, they'd all come out either right where they are now, or even some cases a little better. I mean, hell, if they'd have taken the Apple money, they'd been better off.
Yeah, that's where I will, from now to the end of time, be befuddled at how bad that these are, and these are people that are learned individuals, Jim. They run universities, but they just could not get out of their own way. And here, it was either a big conspiracy against Oregon State and Washington State, or just, a confederacy of dunces, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, and even with the four, right? they could have come up with a deal if they wanted to keep the conference together and have come up with some, good American schools as well as Mountain West schools, backloaded themselves, and basically, Stanford would have had the rubber stamp for any of these schools that they wanted, and for all intents and purposes, they could have created their own conference, and yet they end up, going across the country and taking less money than they could have probably gotten in a secondary deal, again, with Apple or someone like that. So to me, it didn't make sense. But, again, what makes sense in this world at times, it befuddles me as well. It's just weird. But, remember, you and I talked about this, and David and Craig and the gang, we all talked about this last year about how close they, and people forget this, it was one of the things I wrote in Forbes, how close they came to actually doing a merger between the ACC and the PAC.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, they could have ended up in the same place they are now with full shares had the two sides, figured out how to get to here.
Yeah, that's where like all of this again. That's like all the opportunities that the Pac-12 in particular had, and the ACC is trying to avoid being an amalgamation of every bad thing that's happened to the Big 12 and Pac-12 and everyone else. So I get why they're doing this. I totally get why NC State, backed off of like, well, travel is not going to be the thing that's going to keep us from doing this. I think they were on board with North Carolina in that, oh, yeah, we buy the travel thing, and then the realization happens like, well, if the Big Ten called North Carolina tomorrow and said, hey, we'd like you to come, North Carolina is not going to say, hey, well, make sure we get the Wolfpack with us too. They're just going to go. No. So, you got to protect yourself, and their best bet right now is staying with the ACC and keeping it together.
Absolutely. And let's just play this up for just 1 second. All right. Let's say that FSU and Clemson decide to bolt. All right. If FSU and Clemson decides to bolt and they pay the 120, and then they have to pay, let's just say they negotiate down to $300 million instead of half of it. That's $600 million in a war chest you got at the ACC. You can't rebuild the ACC with $300 million?
Yeah, I would think so. So, yeah.
So what exactly are you worried about? I mean, you're in a position, you're in a far better position than the PAC was. You're in a far better position than the Big 12 was at that situation. I'm not saying losing these teams aren't going to hurt. Of course it hurts. But the point being that they've got a king's ransom to get out.
Yeah, and the ACC is, and Jim, I've mentioned this a couple of times on the show this week, and so if people hear me and they think it's repetitive, but I do want people's opinions on it. The weird thing about the ACC is, while this is a good move for now, who knows what a good move for tomorrow is, because the pieces are getting moved on the board so much, but FSU and Clemson seem pretty desperate to get out, and I'll throw UNC on that right now, even though they're trying to say like, oh, it's just about planes, which I don't believe, because again, if the Big Ten called them, they're going to have to ride those planes twice as much as they would, because there's two more teams over there than there would be in Stanford and Cal. But those three teams are desperate to get out. The ACC is desperate to stay at its revenue distribution and stay 15 teams or above. And the three teams that are coming in are desperate to be in the Power 5 in the big time, or the Power 4 now, but in the power conferences in the big time. So this probably has a weird ending, because when desperation collides, that's usually not a good thing. Right.
But I just, what I couldn't understand was Phillips is trying everything he could possibly do to get them extra money. He ends up negotiating a ridiculous deal with, Cal, Stanford, and SMU, which was 100% in favor of the ACC, and they're still pissed off at it.
Yeah. One second there, Derek. But there are, nobody like the conference commissioners, unless you're Yormark, Petiti now, or Sankey,
right?
Like you're just fighting a losing battle uphill. Jim, how do you see this working out when it comes to just television ratings adding these teams in? Do you think it's going to do anything for the ACC to have Pitt and Cal or SMU and Wake, or is that just really not their concern right now?
Well, I mean, look, there's potential, okay? There's potential. You got Duke and Stanford, okay? You got Virginia and Cal. You got some schools there that, I mean, these teams, it hasn't, I can honestly see a situation where Stanford could end up winning, not this year, but in a couple of years. Stanford could win the ACC football championship. I could see that happen. I mean, we don't have to go that far back to when teams were doing really well with Harbaugh, and even under Shaw. You know, this Cal team, probably the Cal team of this year, probably is a bowl eligible team. I mean, it's not like they're bad. So, and then of course, in the Olympic sports, which we don't really seem to count, but should. Stanford has always been, one of the tops in that category, as well as Cal has found it too. So there's reason to watch the content that's going to be there, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue, as you say. Stanford and Pitt and Cal and BC, are almost as exciting as UCLA and Maryland and and USC and Rutgers.
Jim, do you think that there is an eventual appetite for a super league?
I think it's going that way. I think if you look, and honestly, the Big Ten, there's a thing I recommend everyone take a quick look. This one, I'll post it online on Twitter if you want, but it's Front Office Sports had a good article this morning about how the Big Ten basically is positioning themselves as the NFL, where you've got games on Fox, CBS, and and on NBC. You've got a game that starts at noon. You got a game that starts at 3:30, and you've got a game that starts Saturday night. And you've got coast to coast, interest in all the games, and so they've taken the theory of the case for the Big Ten has been, let's make this a national conference. Let's make this as close to it, mirroring, if you will, the NFL model, where you're on basically, every platform you can be on. And so, this is the first of that particular year, and I did a thing with Todd Blackledge yesterday, and it's up today about, big Saturday night and how they're really blowing that up. And they're going to take it on the road with the pregame show and all that. And Peacock has got games tomorrow, and CBS is doing their first Big Ten game in quite a while tomorrow. And so, it's going to be, the Big Ten's going to be omnipresent. Everywhere you look, you're going to see Big Ten content. So yeah, I really do see the Super League situation coming about. There really isn't, that's the only way that they're going to be able to sustain the cash that it's going to take to make this stuff work.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, hope that they figure out a way to stave that off, because it would just be not what we like. We like the NFL for what it is. We like college football for what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can actually sit down and watch a football game and not worry about what conference I'm in.
Yeah.
I mean, or for that matter, I know what conference I'm in. I really don't concern myself about that. I just enjoy the game. And, if they take that away, then you're right. They will have screwed things up, because they've already done a seriously good job of doing that.
Yes, they have. Well, Jim, thank you so much for always
Have
being
a nice
on.
holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy Labor Day. Well, we don't really take Labor Day. We don't really take it off because it's the first day after. So it's. I mean, not like I dig ditches or anything. So, I think I'm all right, and nothing's going to change for me. But Jim, enjoy week 1 of college football. We'll talk to you soon.
Sure. All right, be well. Take care.
All right, Jim Williams, good friend of the program. Always love having him on. We'll take.